All right, friends. Good afternoon to all of you. Jai Hind. Warm welcome to this 34th in the series webinar on the topic Budget 2021 Expectations versus Reality. So, friends, as we are all aware that on 1st February 2021, our Honorable Finance Minister of the country, Ma'am Nirmala Sitharaman, presented the budget on the floor of the House. This is as per Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, which empowers the finance minister and which lays down the procedure to present the budget on the floor of House. And incidentally, just to talk about the budget comes from the French word bouquet, which means a leather bag. And incidentally, as you would have also seen that generally all finance ministers have a bag in their hands while they come for the budget. So this has continued, and the tradition or convention which came and this is followed as such in various countries. And as we know that the budget the estimate of income and expenditure provides for a periodical time period that what are the spendings and what will be the income that will be generated. But overall, this is a small connotation of what budget is. But actually, budget is a financial plan of the government for the whole year, and it talks about the direction that the policy that the government will take and how the country will be progressing in terms of not only the financial part but also the economical part, the political direction, the social direction, and even the cultural direction. So how the country will come about, what will be the planning of the country, what areas and issues will be highlighted, what areas and issues in terms of economy they'll be not so focused upon. So this is all represented in the budget itself. And friends, this was not an easy time to present the budget, and it was really, I think, tough on the finance minister to have come up with the budget, because as you are aware that this is COVID times, and how world over all 190 plus countries, they have been affected by COVID. The economy is in doldrums. Though after the lockdown, the economy has slightly picked up, but you'll be aware that we were down by minus 24. That was how the economy was. Then if you see all the sectors, they were affected by the economy. Talk about the primary sector, which means agriculture sector, wherein though the food production was good, but generally the problem was that in spite of food production, because of the transportation part and because of not getting the labor, even the agriculture sector was affected. Similarly, the manufacturing sector was also affected because of the simple reason that the lockdown came around. Then there was a problem of the labor, then the raw materials, and somehow it was not taking place. So all industries, they were affected by the COVID and the lockdown that followed. Similarly, the tertiary sector or the services sector has been the worst affected. And out of it, I think the hospitality sector, that means the tourism, travel, and the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, because of the lockdown and the closing of airlines, non the transportation measures which were not there. So somehow, because of the sentiment also, the world tourism and in the India tourism has been affected, and it's still not picked up. And I'm not sure when will the results come up on this count. So generally, going by all the three sectors of the economy, they were affected by this. And add to this, how the MSME sector was also affected. Even the startups came around. So therefore, friends, this was a very turbulent time, wherein, as you are aware, that since 2000, year 2000, we have grown by the rate of 7 to 8%. But overall, even prior to COVID coming around, we were just moving at 6%. And the growth had slightly gone down because of the demonetization part, and later because of the implementation of the GST. So all these factors coming together, plus COVID, and then later the confrontation with China, this means that the entire the sentiment came negative, and the entire industry, which needed a lot of push, somehow the budget, there was a lot of expectations from the budget. Now when the finance minister came around to come with this budget, there were certain expectations from the finance minister. First one was to provide a stimulus to the industry which was sagging. similar to the corporate sector to give a push to the economy. This was expectation number one. Then it was also expected to put some money into the taxpayers' pocket, so that that money could be spent in the economy, and therefore the money could be spent, and therefore the economy should move around. This was the expectation number two. Thirdly, it was that many economies world over, they were increasing the taxes. So that was another challenge which the finance minister had to face, that to bring about a change, bring about a stimulus without increasing the taxes. This was stimulation number three. And then they had also to push upon the infrastructure, especially the defense infrastructure, and in our western and eastern borders, so that China on one hand and Pakistan on other hand can be contained, and so that there could be a push overall, and then they provide relief to the corporate sector. So these were the various challenges wherein which the finance minister had to work upon, and she comes up with a budget which focuses on the six pillars, and with a major aspect of self-reliance or Atmanirbhar Bharat. That was the call given by the Honorable Prime Minister. So these six pillars, if you talk about, focuses on the health issues. This is pillar number one. Then it focuses upon the infrastructure, both physical as well as capital. That is pillar number two. Then it also talks about the inclusive development for the aspirational India. That means the youth. This is pillar number three. Then it also talks about reinvigorating the human capital, which India has a lot in abundance, but which would require a lot of investments on the health sector and lot of investment on the education sector. This is pillar number four. Then it talks about bringing about research and development and innovation. This is pillar number five. And lastly, it is about the minimum government and the maximum governance, so that the governance becomes effective without human interface. So this was all the six pillars, my dear friends. And then how this has came about, and what were the expectations, what are the realities. So friends, we have invited three very eminent panelists today who will be discussing these, and I have requested them to focus on three very important issues. One is the allocation of the budget and the direction to the social sector. Secondly, it is about how the infrastructure and economy, and in regarding to the industry, how they'll go about with the push in the budget. And lastly, it is about the taxation, and what are the issues, and how the investment strategy should be framed, so that the investment comes up on the basis of individual taxpayer. So friends, for discussing all this, we are honored today to have among us ourselves Professor A.K. Vashisht. Sir is a former chairman of University Business School, Punjab University, Chandigarh, and to his credit, he is doyen in the field of education, research, projects, planning, consultancy services, publications, then trainings, both attending as well as organizing numbers of seminars, conferences, and to his credit, large number of dissertations and PhDs and all. And sir has to his credit a number of research papers, books, and other publications. The second panelist, my dear friends, is Mr. Vinay Grover. Vinay Grover is Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Symbiosis Management Consultants, Chandigarh. And they are doing a wonderful work in the field of strategic human resources, organization development, and change management, and in the field of succession planning, and in the field of training and development. So he is a first generation entrepreneur who has made big due to his hard work and stint and since last around 25 years, and doing a wonderful work in the field of consultancy, which started basically for the as a headhunter in the field of human resources, and now has panned out in various other aspects of human resources. And he's a consultant now pan India, providing to especially Delhi, Chandigarh, Northern India, and other aspects with regard to strategic human resource transformation. So welcome, Vinay. The third panelist, my dear friends, is Mr. Lalit Malhotra. Lalit is the zonal head of Bajaj Capital Limited. Bajaj Capital Limited is a pan-India company which specializes in investment strategies and advices in terms of available. And Lalit is with them. Lalit with Bajaj Capital since last around more than around 17, 18 years. And he is a very well-known figure in this sector. So welcome, Lalit. So I welcome all the three panelists on the dais, Professor Vashisht, Mr. Vinay Grover, and Mr. Lalit Malhotra. And friends, the SARI team will be that firstly, Professor Vashisht, I'll request him to speak about the social sector, and thereafter Mr. Vinay Grover will take upon the allocation to the industry and infrastructure. And lastly, it will be Mr. Lalit Malhotra who will talk about, how the taxation has gone by and what strategies should be followed in this direction in this coming year to save money and to, invest our money into as such. Welcome, sir, and warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining. And the dais is all yours now, sir. Sir.
Thank you, Professor Chadha, for organizing this webinar on very, very important topic. This is Budget 2021. In fact, budget is an important activity which affects the lives of each one of us. And I think the kind of assignment given to me is to speak on social sector. In fact, the budget affects each and every segment of the society. No one remains unaffected with the budget presentation. Budget is an ongoing activity. It is done every year. Every year there are expectations from the budgets, and the finance minister of the country tries to meet some of the expectations. In fact, there is a gigantic task as far as the budgeting process is concerned, because there's a lot of gap in what is and what is ought to be. So there is a difference between the two. This has to be fulfilled. In fact, as far as social sector is concerned, the important aspects of the social sector, I would say, it is education, it is health, it is employment, it is a rural sector, it is a woman, it is a minority, it is a tribal. In fact, state is bound to act in the interest of the society or different segments of the social economy. Friends, as far as the budget allocation this year is concerned, there is a mixed bag. In some of the situations, some of the cases, the budgetary allocations have been increased, and in other cases, the budgetary allocations have been decreased. The decrease in the allocation may be because of the constraint of the resources on the part of the government because of the pandemic going on almost over 1 year. So because of a resource crunch, this year's the budgetary allocation is not, to my mind, as per the expectations of the society, especially education sector and the health sector. If you look to the prominent ministries which help in certain vulnerable sector of the society, there are 4 ministries which are engaged. One is the Ministry of Women and Child Development. In case of this ministry, the budget allocation has been reduced. It was 30,000 crores in the last year. Now it has been reduced to 24,435 crores. So there is a reduction. I fail to understand whether this year the priority of the government has changed as far as its obligation towards the children or the women is concerned. Now there are so many programs which need to be taken care of by the government, especially towards the women and the child development. The issues relating to the women safety, the issues relating to women education, the issues relating to other aspects of the children, I think more resources should have been provided as far as the women and children are concerned. In case of another ministry, that is this Ministry of Minority Affairs, there has been a reduction in the budgetary allocation. But in case of 2 ministries, one is the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, the budget allocation has been slightly increased. It was 10,102 crores last year. Now it has been raised to 10,516 crores, a slight increase. And in the case of Ministry of Tribal Affairs, there has been an increase. It was slight increase only, I would say. It was 7,411 crores. Now this year it is 7,525 crores. Now if we look to the different programs which constitute the social sector or which affect the society, the budgetary allocation has been a mixed bag. In certain cases, they have been increased, and in case of certain other cases, there has been decrease. And in certain cases, there has not been any kind of a change. I can speak some of the budgetary allocations in case of specific programs. First is NREGA. In the case of NREGA, there has been increase by 18.6%, and the amount increased this time is 11,500 crores. In case of National Health Mission, there is an increase of 8.8%. In case of STD and AIDS control program, the budgetary allocation has been kept intact. There is no change. It is the same as it was last year. In the case of Prime Minister's Swasthya Suraksha Yojana, there has been increase of 16.2%. And in case of National Social Assistance Program, there is no change. The budgetary allocation has been kept at the same level as it was last year. And in case of midday meals for the students, the budgetary allocation has been increased by 500 crores by 4.4%. But as far as the Kisans are concerned, as far as the government responsibility towards the farming community is concerned, the some kind of help which is given to the farmers, that has been reduced drastically by 10,000 crores, 13.3 crores. In case of Smart City Mission, there is no change. In case of, I think there is a significant increase as far as National Rural Drinking Water Mission is concerned. There has been increase of 38,511 crores, an increase of 334.8%. That has been increased. In fact, the government has realized that in the rural areas, there is a shortage of drinking water facility. So there is a need for augment this particular facility, and a lot of allocation funds have been allocated to this particular area. Similarly, there has been increase in the National Rural Livelihood Mission of 48.5 crores. But there is a significant decrease in the case of another component, that is Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. There has been a reduction of 23% as far as maybe this is a constraint of funds, but still there are certain areas where there is a need for rural roads. I think rural roads should have been a priority of the government, because rural roads, they are the life being on through which they are very important for the development of the rural areas. So coming over to certain specific schemes, firstly, I would like to make my comments on NREGA. In fact, NREGA is a scheme of the government, it's a program of the government which provides guaranteed jobs to the rural people for 100 years in a particular year. Now, in fact, this year, because of pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs. They moved back to their villages from the cities and took up jobs in the villages. So there was a need to put more money in scheme like the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. The allocation for the scheme under the Rural Development Ministry has seen only a slight increase over the previous budget. While in the year, budget estimate is 37,000 crore, it is higher than the last year's budget estimate, but it is less than the revised budget estimate of the last year, which was 1,11,500 crores. So during COVID, India witnessed the highest level of job losses. There was a problem of food security, resulting into starvation. Working people have suffered deep distress. As such, the fresh allocation of rupees 73,000 crores for this particular year, that is the year 21-22, does not inspire much confidence, since the spending in the current fiscal has shown that the demand for funds under this scheme is really high. In fact, this particular NREGA program provides a guarantee of 100 days job in one particular year. That means out of 365 days, they get employment for 100 years and they remain idle for 265 days. So I don't know what they will be doing in this particular part of the time. So they should have a focus on creating some kind of job opportunities in the rural areas, right? But this kind of a focus is missing as far as this budget is concerned. Professor Chadha was mentioning about the significance of education and health. In fact, education and the health should be the primary responsibility of the government. Other sectors can be privatized, but education and health should not be given in the private hands, especially as far as the rural people and the socially vulnerable classes of the society are concerned. Now, at this particular budget, the government has shown a very alarming display of negligence. The union government has sharply slashed budget allocation for education for this year by 6,088 crores in comparison to the budget outlay of 21. This has come at a time when schools and universities have remained shut for over 10 months and are in desperate need for a special package to be back on track. That education has remained one of the low priority areas for the government can be inferred from the fact that it was not able to spend the allocations made in the year 2021 budget. While it had set aside rupees 99,312 crores for the education ministry, in the financial year 21, it could spend only rupees 85,089 crores in a year that witnessed scores of students struggling to attend online classes and had received restricted education to education. Despite such unprecedented exigencies, the union government allocated only rupees 93,224 crores for education, which is far less than the requirement. Curiously, the finance minister thought it fit this year to open more routes to privatize school education. She announced that the union government would include 100 government-run Sainik schools to be managed under the PPP mode and opened around 750 Eklavya schools across India. Experts have been pointing out that spending on Eklavya school, one teacher school, instead of full-fledged facilities for children should only be a stopgap arrangement in between the government's effort to build permanent education infrastructure. The sharp at a time when they should have Aishas. The finance minister announced that the government would improve the infrastructure in around 15,000 schools appears to be another way to outsource the task to private schools. The dip in education budget may also impact India's efforts to contain COVID-19 pandemic. Official figures clearly quote that only 54% schools in India have facilities of drinking water, functioning toilets, and hand wash facilities, which are absolutely essential to keep safe from the coronavirus. The Right to Education Act provides for such facilities to be built in schools. However, its implementation has only lagged since many years, the last year being the worst. The union government has proudly announced the new education policy that contained multi-layered transformation. However, successively poor allocation in the budget for education shows the government is not confident of its own model. In fact, education should be the top priority as far as any welfare state is concerned. Because if the masses of the society, they are properly educated, they result into good human resources, and it is a good human resources only which can change the destiny and the fortune of a particular country. Another important aspect of the society is health. I think health is the most affected area in the last year because of the corona epidemic. Amid speculation that India health sector would be given a boost in the light of pandemic, the health ministry has allocated rupees 73,931 crores in budget 21-22, which is an almost 10% increase from last year, according to official documents which were released. What is more interesting and perhaps even curious is that the revised estimate for the year 2021 stood at 82,921 crore, which is higher than this year's budget allocation, right? In the National Health Mission scheme, the government spent rupees 35,534 crore as against rupees 34,115 crore allocated last year. For 2021, the government has allocated rupees 37,130 crore, which is a slight increase of 8.8%. For the national AIDS and STD control programs, the revised estimate for the financial year 2021 stood at rupees 2,900 crore, and the budget estimate this time is also 2,900 crore. So there is no change or increase. In the Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana, the allocation has seen an increase of 16% with the budget estimate of rupees 7,000 crore. The revised estimate last year stood at rupees 7,517 crores against the budget estimate of rupees 6,020 crores. A new scheme called the Pradhan Mantri Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana has been announced, for which rupees 64,180 crores have been set aside to be spent over the next 6 years. However, bifurcation of rupees 64,180 crore is not yet clear. To push its vaccination drive, rupees 35,000 crores have been announced for COVID-19 vaccine. This amount is almost equal to 46.9% of the entire health allocation, and means the significant part of the health budget is going to be used to fight against COVID-19. The health budget also provides proposal for 15 health emergency centers, along with direction to strengthen the National Center for Disease Control, which manages infectious disease having the potential for escalating into large-scale outbreaks. As part of its initiative towards the rural areas, 2 mobile hospitals have been proposed to overcome the accessibility issue in remote areas. It has been further focused on malnutrition. An improvised Mission Poshan 2.0 has been proposed, which is going to be an umbrella program under which supplementary nutrition programs and Poshan mission will be merged. The third area is basically the farming community. As well, there are schemes for the farmers. The allocation for Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme, which accounts for 53% of the allocation to the Ministry of Agriculture, has been decreased by rupees 10,000 crore in comparison to the budget estimate for the year 2021. However, the allocation remains the same as the revised estimate for the year at rupees 65,000 crores. The scheme was devised with the aim to provide income support to all farmer family across the country and to enable them to take care of expenses related to agriculture and allied activities as well as domestic needs. Under the scheme, central government makes a payment of rupees 6,000 per year in 3 quarterly installments of rupees 2,000 to the farmer families, subject to certain exclusion of higher income groups. Though 14.5 crores farmers are expected to be covered under the scheme, the queries filed last year under the RTI revealed that during the COVID-19 lockdown from March 23 to July 31, when farmers were in dire need of funds and assistance, as many as 11.2 lakhs payment transfers under PM Kisan scheme failed. Additionally, till December 2020, nearly 44% of the transfer failures had not been addressed. The Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmers Welfare stated in response to query under the Right to Information Act. I have already spoken about women and children development. The impact of any crisis is never gender neutral. As the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic deepened in the country, women and children were almost the worst hit. While women, especially those involved in domestic and unorganized sectors, were the first to face the brunt of the economic slowdown, loss of livelihoods, and weakened income capacities, children too were severely impacted by the deep digital divide induced by the pandemic. Some of the children, they had access to digital, others they did not. Contrary to the expectations, the budget this year has rather been disappointing. None of the primary concerns of women and children made it to the list, and only rupees 24,435 crores were allocated for the women and children development. The financial year 21 budget had set aside rupees 30,000 crores. There was a fall of 14% in this particular year. India has been conducting gender-responsive budgeting as a part of its union budget since 2005-06, in tandem with several European countries and the United Kingdom. Soon after the budget presentation, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that this budget has categorically made announcements to ease and make lives of women better. However, the numbers suggest no clear outline for the women welfare, job losses suffered in the past year, or loss of education faced by the children. Then we come to the agriculture. With the farmer agitation against the 3 farm laws brought in previous monsoon session still raising at the borders of Delhi, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman today emphasized a great deal on the centre's procurement policy and scheme for the agriculture sector that implies nearly half of the country's workforce. The total budgetary allocation for the sector for the year 21-22 has been decreased by around rupees 11,231 crore in comparison to the budget estimate for the year 2021. However, the financial year 22 is about 5.6% more than the revised estimate for the financial year 21. This may have been because the center was unable to spend on some scheme due to COVID-19 lockdown. As a farmer have been demanding that the minimum support price be made mandatory and purchase of produce below it made an offense. Sitharaman, while dealing with the topic, said the MSC regime has undergone a change to ensure price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities. She also claimed that the disbursement for the procurement of wheat, paddy and pulses has grown significantly over the past 6 years. In case of wheat, the total amount paid to the farmer in 2013-14 was rupees 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, it was rupees 62,802 crore. She added that in the current fiscal, the amount has risen to about rupees 75,000 crore. Similarly, for the paddy, she said the amount has risen from rupees 63,928 crores in 2013-14 to rupees 1,41,930 crores, with the expectation for the current fiscal being rupees 1,72,752 crores. So the Finance Minister also announced that the increase in the agriculture infrastructure fund to rupees 40,000 crores and double the micro irrigation corpus to rupees 10,000 crores. As a farmer have been protesting against the introduction of private mandis or wholesale markets, the minister said that 1,000 more mandis will be integrated with the electronic national market. She added that the agriculture infrastructure fund would be made available to APMCs to augment infrastructure facilities. This sought to address the charge that the government was deliberately trying to weaken the APMC procurement system so that ultimately the farmer left at the mercy of the private markets. So friends, as far as the budgetary allocation for the social sector this year is concerned, it has been a mixed one. There were increases in certain areas and there were decreases in certain areas. But to my mind, the government has been negligent as far as the 2 core sectors of the society are concerned. One is education, other is the health. The focus of the government on the education is missing. There has been increased emphasis on the privatization or public-private mode. I think government should take lead as far as providing quality education in government school, improving the infrastructure in the government school. And also, one more thing, that is in the case of health sector, the government should also play a dominant role so that we have a stout Indian population which can take the role of changing the destiny of the country. Friends, with these words, I complete my presentation. Whatever I have to say, later on, if there are some question answers, I can participate thereon. So I switch back to Professor Chadha to take the proceedings further. Professor Sanjeev Chadha ji.
Right. Thank you, sir, for this very comprehensive talk on the how the budget has gone in terms of social allocation. And as you rightly said, it is a mixed bag, wherein some some of the areas have been highlighted and have been given a push, like the health sector because of COVID, and I think the Jal Jeevan scheme of the government providing water. But other sectors like education and all, they further needs a lot of push. And the advent of privatization into the education part is again a question mark. So thank you, sir, for this very enlightening discourse. So to take the matter forward, now I request Mr. Vinay Grover to take from here. So welcome, Vinay, and the dais is all yours now. Yeah. Yeah, Vinay, kindly unmute yourself. Kindly unmute yourself, Vinay. Vinay, you muted. Kindly unmute yourself. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah, fine.
So thank you, Sanjeev, for the lively introduction you had given in the beginning. And good afternoon to my fellow panelists, Dr. Vashisht and Mr. Lalit Malhotra. Hello and a warm welcome to all the listeners who have joined the panel discussion on the budget today. Hats off to Sanjeev for his consistency. He religiously conducts weekly sessions, not only informative, but concerns the larger sections of the society. If I'm not mistaken, I think we are on 34th session without even a single break. It means for the last 8 months, Sanjeev has sacrificed his Sundays. Coming to the topic of the discussion, the budget expectation versus reality. So what came in and what didn't? So I start with this because every year we are actually keenly awaiting for the budget to give us an idea as to what is there in store for all of us. But after a long time, I think we have come across a budget that seems to have set the course for not only 5 years, but almost a decade. This year budget has actually a lot more significance as we are still passing through one of the worst difficult times in our lives. The pandemic, I think it has hit us hard physically, emotionally, and wrecked us financially and economically. Not only India, but the entire world has passed through this crisis. In such a scenario, the government didn't have a choice to be conservative, but had to bat at a front foot. And our finance minister has done reasonably well. It was to choose between growth or populism, and she has gone for growth at the expense of populist measures. Now, we've been talking about a fiscal deficit, which has risen to almost about 9.5%. But in case we look back at the year, I think for a month and a half, we had a complete lockdown. Even otherwise, the lockdown still continues. So industry definitely didn't work. And in such a scenario, there was actually a shortfall of collections. Probably you'd call it direct taxes or indirect taxes. And at the same time, the government actually has given a stimulus of almost about 20,000 lakh crore, which I believe actually has given a rise to the fiscal deficit of 9.5%. And even the fiscal deficit for the next year is being pegged at 6.5%. Now, it will be a very humongous task to bring it at the levels, probably I would say till the last year, which was almost about 3 to 4% of the GDP. Now, given the consumption story of India, we have a large burgeoning middle class, and thanks to our 1.4 billion population, and if in case the policy is supported and remain prudent, I think we will be in a position to bring it down to 3% or maybe even below in the times to come. Now, I'm not saying that fiscal deficit being on the higher side is a prudent thing. So once fiscal deficit rise, we will have a problem. The credit rating agencies would, bring the credit rating of India down. So we will have a difficulty in borrowing the funds. I think almost about 34 to 36% of our income is the source of borrowing, which we buy from IMF, World Bank, and from other countries. So we'll be actually raising the money on a higher interest, and at the same time, FDI would slow down. So keeping a fiscal deficit in check, that I think is definitely a prudent thing. But at the given circumstances, we didn't had any choice. So finance minister on the other side has tried to push the investments via public spending. At the same time, it has encouraged private sector to invest, which at the moment is unfortunately saddled by the overcapacity. The stimulus being given to the various sectors, I'm sure will propel the job market, and then the consumption is bound to grow. The budget has been based on 6 pillars, as already detailed by Dr. Chadda. I will concentrate my discussion largely on the infrastructure and boost to the industry. So, union budget, I'll just give the important highlights as far as the industry and the infra is concerned. Uh, in totality, this budget can be termed as an expenditure budget. Compared to a capex of 1.1 lakh CR in the revised estimate of 2021, the hike is 35%, which is 5.50 lakh crore in this coming year. Now, the government actually means business, and the government has signaled a reform. 2 public sector banks and 1 state general insurance company is to be privatized. Please take note of it. I'm talking about privatization. I'm not talking about divestment here. So you could see probably, the small banks or some mid-sized banks like Bank of India, Maharashtra, Central Bank of India, or maybe even Indian Overseas Bank could go under the hammer. And this would be the first round of privatization. I think it is to say the testing the waters. And then, as I said, one of the state-owned general insurance company would also be privatized. So to bring in the FDI, FDI in insurance has been hiked from 49% to 74%. I'm sure the insurance companies would take advantage of that. And then we have big LIC IPO would be coming this year. So the government is trying to raise the money on the other hand. So the government is standing right on the one of the pillars when it says minimum government and maximum governance. So the third thing which I say is no populism, but focus has been on the growth. Despite being a tough year for the Aam Aadmi, the finance minister has avoided giving any tax relief, no increase in standard deduction, no raise in the tax slabs. Then health definitely getting its due. In a year when the world was ravished by the COVID-19 pandemic, finance minister has given the attention. Health allocation has jumped 137% to rupees 2.25 lakh crore and rupees 35,000 crore for the COVID-19 vaccine and more funds if required. Now, this is a very big announcement which will definitely take care of the NPAs which are actually happening in the banks. Now, asset reconstruction. After dithering for almost 6 years, the government has finally decided to set up asset reconstruction company that will take over the bad loan of the banks, which is almost, I think, about 14% of their lending portfolio, giving them the flexibility to finance the economic recovery. There's another big news, development finance institution, which is reborn. The idea was considered as dead with the most earlier DFIs, including IDBI and ICCI, turning into banks. To provide debt to the long gestation projects, a new DFI with a capital of almost about 20,000 CR has been formed. It will be a statutory backing, but will be professionally managed, lending portfolio of rupees 5 lakh CR within that 3 years. This is being anticipated. And I'm sure this will actually be giving a boost to the real estate sector and the infrastructure sector. Now, asset monetization, this is an ongoing exercise where the government actually hasn't done much to inspire the confidence, and the scorecard of the government has been very poor here. So national monetization pipeline of potential assets such as NHAI, railways, power grid, airports, warehouses, sports stadiums. So this is, I think, again, if in case the government puts it right, so this can be an area where actually it can increase the revenue, and obviously that can take care of the spending and eventually the fiscal deficit. Roads and infra. I think here the eyes is on the election in the 4 states, which are West Bengal, West Bengal, Assam, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. So in all, I think 8,500 kilometers of the national highways have been envisaged, and a big spending is going to, definitely pump up steel, cement, and the aluminum industry. Now, the strategic disinvestment, again, this needs a political and a bureaucratic push. Niti Aayog has been asked to shortlist non-core PSUs for strategic sale. After a poor show in 2021, I think it's obvious because the market was down, so the valuations were down. So the government actually has not been able to keep up the divestment. So the receipt estimates this year is about like 1,75,000 crore from the disinvestment of non-core PSUs. So now talking about the big news, PLI has been announced for 13 sectors. So these 13 sectors are renewable energy, electric vehicles, air conditioners, LEDs, solar PV modules, lithium-ion battery, telecom and networking products, automobile and auto components, specialty steel, textile. So the government has announced PLI. Those companies who would start manufacturing, they will receive incentive ranging from about 4% to 6% of the production value in the next 5 years. So the textile, I would say the textile, there's a big news, 7 mega textile parks in 3 years. India employs almost about 45 million directly and 60 million through allied industry. I would say, I think everybody would be aware about that India was a giant, India was a leading country in terms of textiles and apparels, but now China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, they have taken a stride and they have gone much more ahead in terms of the exports of the apparels and the textiles. But nonetheless, the government is trying to come back, and these textile parks would be integrated textile parks with common utilities, the R&D labs, the transportation losses would be minimized. And when it's integrated, I think the supply chain obviously would also, the back-end supply chain would also come in, and where these textile parks would definitely play a big role in terms of increasing the Indians' competitiveness and the exports, and bringing in the foreign exchange revenue, which is much desired. Now, the other, avenues to push the infra where the government has gone big is the National Rail Plan. So the government has decided to develop the rail infra by 2030 to cater to the projected traffic requirement up to 2050. So this in one way will increase the share of the freight by rail from around 27% to 45%. 100% electrification of the broad gauge by 2023. This would save, I think, on the fuel where we import, and we will save on the forex outgo. So now coming to the power sector, another big news is hydrogen energy mission to be launched. This hydrogen energy would be actually generated from the renewable sources. And this, if in case being materialized, this comes much cheaper. For an example, like say for an heavy electric vehicle to get charged through the conventional electricity, it takes about 90 minutes. But in case we do it through energy which is being created through hydrogen, it would take about 10 minutes only to get it fully charged. Another big thing, I think we all are living in a, cities or the states where we are getting electricity through the power distribution companies, which are normally the state-owned companies. So government is trying to now rope in the private sector into the distribution of the power. So the electricity which will be coming to our household, we will have the choices. When I say we'll have the choices, we, like in telecom today, we go for Airtel or say Vodafone or for Reliance. So again, tomorrow we will have a choice to pick up like whose electricity do we want. So this will increase the consumer experience. Definitely a plus point here. The price and the service we can choose from, and I'm sure like 24/7 supply is something that we all look for without any disruption. So this will also stem the distribution and the revenue losses. So government also plans to let the private companies into the transmission business. And this obviously again would stem down some losses for the government, and government can definitely, utilize this assets to become more effective, and revenue would also be accrued from here. Now, similar thing, we have port shipping and waterways. So the government has envisaged triple B mode to be utilized for managing operational services at the major ports. Recycling of ships to be doubled. Recycling ship again has come in here. So another big thing which as government has announced is the scrappage policy of the vehicles. Now, scrappage policy, in case I talk about, the government has allowed the commercial vehicles to ply for 15 years. That means the life of commercial vehicles is 15 years. And the passenger vehicles' life is 20 years. Thereafter, the vehicles have to get certified. Now, look at this, 1.5 crore vehicles will go off-road after this policy. I mean, though it is voluntary, and they need to get certified. Somebody doesn't get a certification. So 1.5 crore vehicles are already there to be scrapped. So once these vehicles get scrapped, so I think they have to be replaced by the newer ones. This is going to give the boost to automobile and the auto components. At the same time, it gives boost to the steel and the aluminum industry. And this is a very big news for the automobile industry. Now, Dr. Vashisht also discussed about the Jal Jeevan Mission. The government has announced Jal Jeevan Mission for urban. This will be giving a universal water supply to all ULBs, that is urban local bodies. Then Urban Swachh Bharat Mission will have an outlay of 14 lakh crore in the next 5 years. 42 urban centers to be opened to tackle the pollution. Now, coming on, like, I'll just give a brief, who were the gainers and who were the losers. If in case I talk about gainers, then hospitals are the major beneficiaries here. Hospitals, because of the COVID situation and the government allocation towards the health, I think that's where they gain. Textile, as I discussed, because of the new textile parks, integrated textile, mega textile parks that are coming up. Steel and aluminum. Some import duty has been slashed on steel, which is specialty steel. At the same time, the scrappage policy would give a boost to steel, and the road infra and the rail infra and the other infra news would definitely give a boost to the sector. Real estate and construction, with the DFIs being formed, they will get the desired funds. Banks, now the NPAs being taken out of their books, I think they can give a vigor which is required to uplift the economy. Then losers, I think, because government is going to do the borrowing very, very heavily, the bonds would take a beating. Bonds have already taken a beating, actually. Then there was no direct announcement relating to exports. Yes, in case you look at, then definitely it can be taken care of. It has been taken care of, but there's no direct news where the exporters get some kind of a reprieve. Rural economy, again, didn't got much to boost the consumption. IT companies, I think, by and large, didn't had anything to look at this in this budget. Education has taken a beating with a budget of, with a budgetary allocation of 99,000 CR in the last budget. The government has actually trimmed it down 93,000 CR. So it is lesser by 66,000 CR. And at the same time, the GST at the rate of 18% has been imposed on the education sector, which is, I think, going to be, creating a deep hole in the parents' pocket. So then, I would say agricultural and farmers, it's a mixed bag. though the government has announced concessional credit to the farmers. They have created a agri infra fund, emergency working capital for the farmers, amendment to the Essential Commodities Act, agricultural marketing reforms. Then rural again, the government has extended Swamitwa to all the states and UTs, which was earlier in the 6 states. This is basically the digitization of the land records. To and say this is a part of a blockchain. And now the land record, once digitized, I think it would result to the very fair kind of a valuation for everything. And at the same time, there will be less of the legal and the civil cases which normally goes into the rural land buying. Then extension of Operation Green to be extended to the 22 perishable items. 1,000 more APMC mandis to be linked to ENAM, that's the Electronic National Agricultural Market. Now, why I'm saying that, it's a mixed bag for farmers, because farmers were looking for, some reprieve in terms of your minimum support price, that's MSP, or even the cancellation of the 3 laws which have been there, but there's no reprieve, no announcement from the government on this front. So concluding here, I will say it was the choice to either revive the patient who was on the deathbed, probably by giving them a better dose, the government has done that, or let the patient die in peace. I mean, here the choice to revive the industry and economy through tough measures, or let it fall flat, upside down with a flat belly. The government, I believe, has taken a pragmatic approach and has not fallen under the pressure of being populist at the moment. Thank you. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Yeah, thank you, Vinay, and very comprehensively dealt with the topic in terms of both infrastructure, also what the government is doing, and the stimuli that the private sector was wanting all the time to revive and then to grow up and to make the losses that has been incurred during the last around 8 to 9 months. And as rightly said, that this second generation reforms, the first generation reforms took over when the liberalization, privatization, and globalization came in the year 1990s onwards. But the second generation reform was quite overdue, and because of that, India was not able to get to the point wherein they wanted to. But now I think what has happened is that because of this threat of COVID came around, and then all the reforms that were required, and rather they are pushed by multilateral agencies like IMF, World Bank also. They have been brought about, starting from building up the infrastructure, then talking about the privatization of the power sector, bringing about non-renewable energy sources, and even talking about disinvestment and privatization, and the government should remain only in the core sector areas. Many people will differ from the philosophy and the point of view, but I think what the government is following is following the model what China does with providing big infrastructure, providing the environment wherein everybody can grow, but then at the same time reducing the doles and the subsidies, which the government thinks, and maybe the data can prove otherwise, have not been so productive, wherein the gap between the rich and poor has risen all the years. But the philosophy of the government is that we need to bring about an environment which is more transparent, but then it needs to be competitive also, so that you can fight the competition, whatever the world is offering as such. So thanks a lot, Vinay, for this very comprehensive insight into rather a very difficult task to do so. So now I request Shri Lalit Malhotra ji to take over from herein and to talk about what has been the taxation strategies of the government, and how they have been would be mopping up the money, and then whether some transparencies, and later what should be the investment strategies of individual taxpayers in this scenario. So welcome, Lalit, and the stage is all yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev sir. And I think already Vashish sir and Vinay sir covered most part related to the budget. But as far as taxation is concerned, I believe this was the toughest part of every budget, because Every person, either is a salaried person or a retired person or a businessman, everybody needs a relief from taxation angle. And to cover that, I think it's a time to waive the budget 2021 outcome against the expectation of the consumer and businesses. India's low awaited annual budget comes amid closed hopes in a year when the nation was in a worst recession. I just believe that the country's GDP contracted due to the COVID-19, while unemployment has been soared, leaving the banking sector's crisis alone. The FM Sitaramanji stated that the budget focused on spending more because everybody was talking about it will be a populist budget, but she did the reverse thing. She said, "Okay, we are into crisis, but we will focus on spending more to push growth." Increase outlays in the critical sectors such as healthcare and infrastructure, which are already covered by Vashish sir and Vinay sir, were announced to encourage more economic activity. It was an important aspect to note here is the choice made by the government to raise funds. It has decided to keep the direct tax rates unchanged, which is a big boost, while going for the divestment in two PSU banks, as sir mentioned. And I know if we go into the deep, we may think it will be either Bank of Baroda or PNB. It's a very premature to say the bank's name because they never announced in the budget proposal. But we believe these were the main, it will be the two banks. And non-tax revenue means to address India worsen fiscal deficit situation, because I will talk about the fiscal deficit. Taking a closer look, I think at personal taxation, many considered that the Union Budget 2021 had fewer impactful announcements than the last time. Starting from a much hype expectation, because everybody was talking about, because it was a COVID-19, there will be some COVID cess. Hopefully, thankful, we can say there was no any COVID cess in this budget. This was not announced at the budget 2021, relieving the income tax assesses from any additional tax expense. I think it's a positive thing that there will be no any additional tax from April 2021. There was an exceptional from a few corners that tax slabs, rates, and rebate under Section 87 of Income Tax Act may be revisited. However, no changes were made to the current slab rates or rebate. It's a very positive sign that they not increase any taxation in this budget. And expected the exemption of cash allowance instead of leave travel insurance LTC for purchase of goods and services will be available from assessment year ending 31st 2022. Meeting the many expectation, the time limit of sanction affordable housing loans for claiming additional deduction of interest under Section 80 EEA gets further extended up to the 31st March 2022. It's again a very welcome note because everybody wants to save tax, and for affordable housing, there is an additional tax benefit on interest on paying home loan. So they extended till March 2022. However, the government has not proposed any higher deduction under Section 80 DDB and 80D because everybody is expecting, because of COVID, mostly people increase their insurance premium. They believe that the earlier limit was 25,000 individual will maybe increase in the coming budget, but there was no any announcement. Whether as an additional medical expenditure or insurance premium paid only any top-up health insurance policy against COVID-19 like the expectation, because we were believing that because of increase in the health insurance and their premiums, we were expecting some announcement from the coming budget, but there were no any announcement into this area. And neither was any deduction announced for work from home expenses, because as Dr. Sanjeev sir is doing this from last 8 months, and we are going to office now, but I remember the COVID time days, everybody was working from home. So we were expecting there must be some relief, or you can say some deduction announced for work from home expenses, and nor the standard deduction limits change. Also, the limit under Section 80C and 24B were left unchanged. We were expecting, because every year we know 1.5 lakh is 80C limit is from the last so many years. We were expecting the budget will increase the limit in the coming time, but in this budget also there was no any news on 80C and 24B. Amid various speculations, there were otherwise no relaxation in the residential status granted for those persons who were stranded in India due to COVID. However, the relief from filling ITR for senior citizen, which is a welcome note, subject to conditions, because if somebody is senior citizen whose income is only from pension and interest, only those who are above 75 are now exempted from filing ITR. Likewise, income tax will be imposed on proceeding of high premium ULIPs, because and one side they want to push the growth, but another side they're just surprised by giving this proposal for ULIPs interest on PF employee contribution is over 2.5 lakh, because they changes that they want to reduce the government burden on interest income, because everybody knows either you are in government employee or you are a pensioner. Mostly people, what they do, they were deducting the higher amount towards the GPF, so that they can create a long term retirement corpus. But now government come to know that it's a tax interest burden to the government, because interest on GPF is tax free. That's why the interest on PF employee contribution each above 2.5 lakh is now under tax scanner. So that's why I believe if I come to the highlights, the first thing is no filling of ITR by senior citizen who are above 75 year age and have only pension and interest income. Second, proposed to tax interest income on PF contribution above 2.5 lakh in a year, which they want the people must spend more because they want to push the economy. Third, they to bring the FDI into the country, they amend the Insurance Act. Earlier it used to only 49%, but now they increase from 49 to 74%. Then PLI scheme to create manufacturing global champions for Atmanirbhar Bharat have been announced for 13 sectors, which already Grover sir covered that. I believe in Atmanirbhar Bharat, because now we have to see what are the opportunities we have in the current scenario. Still, I believe NPS is a best tool to create your retirement corpus, because it's a Government of India initiative, and it gives you additional tax benefit on your normal tax slab, because everybody knows you have only limited option. ATC you have 1.5, ATD you have 25,000 rupees, and balance you have to pay tax, because either you go for ATG for your donation rebate. But if you cover NPS, there is an additional benefit of 50,000 rupees. If you contribute toward an NPS, you save 33% tax on that. So that we must consider as a NPS as another tool to save your taxation. Then, in a very surprise note, in the year 2020, the income tax return filers saw a dramatic increase to 6.4 crore from 3.31 crore in 2014. So now people are aware, yes, they have to file the return. There are benefits. You are contributing toward the nation. This is a very big change. Then reform introduced for the benefit of taxpayer and economy, including slashing of corporate tax rate, abolition of dividend distribution tax, and increasing the rebate of small taxpayers. Extended the eligibility period for claiming, which I covered already, that it's an additional benefit that they extended till 2022 for 1.5 interest paid against for the loan repayment. So these are the main highlights. But yes, everybody knows that we have a lot of expectation, because when we know when people, if you go for a taxation purpose, you have very limited options to save tax. If you go for bank FD, that's interest is taxable. If you go for any mutual fund, now that's again is taxable. So where to go? That's what we have to see. We were expecting lot many announcement, like last budget, we were expecting that they reduce the dividend distribution tax, but this time also they ignore that part, because whatever dividend income is getting in the hands of investor, they have to pay tax 10%. So now dividend is also 10% taxable income. So that's why you have to see, you have very limited option to secure your regular you can say tax saving and to generate returns. But still, in this scenario, I must suggest a person who wants a regular income, first of all, he must cover the Government of India scheme like PM Vaya Vandana Yojana. Still, they offer a higher interest rate, and it's guaranteed by Government of India, and there is a cap of 15 lakh per person. Second, you can go for PPF. Still, I believe other than GPF, PPF still a better option, because the interest is tax free. Second, you have a limit of 1.5 lakh per annum, which give you additional benefit of ATC to secure tax. The third, I believe still RBI bonds are there to give you better returns, because when bank rates are slashing down, still RBI bond offer you 7.15 per annum returns, and it's give you chance to give you regular half yearly interest which due on 1st Feb and 1st July, because it's a government of India, still a safe bet. Then you can cover mutual fund, but mutual fund is subject to market risk, so you have to choose, because as per the risk appetite you have to divide your mutual fund allocation. Still there are some schemes which are less risky, like some debt funds, some hybrid funds, so you have to consider your risk appetite. Then we suggest go for mutual fund, because in the coming scenario this will be the future, because Atmanirbhar Bharat means they want the just not secure your money only by putting in bank deposit or saving account, because you have to calculate the inflation and the return outcome. If you see the average inflation is 6%, after the petrol price is higher so much, you can consider if your money is lying into 6% bank FD or in saving account, you are not able to beat the inflation. And how will create your the retirement corpus? So you have to calculate, you have to pen down from the money is coming, where the money is going, and how my money is making out of money. This is a very relevant thing in this current scenario, and we have to think serious towards it, because at the end of the day, when we retired, we come to know that we were just eating our money just by paying inflation. So that's why we have to consider these things very seriously. And as far as budget is concerned, we still believe this government is serious. They want to do business. They don't want to give you any subsidy. They don't want to please everyone. Okay, we will give you this this benefit, that benefit. They're serious toward the business. Okay, boss, we have this land bank. We want to utilize it, because this were doing so many years back. We have come to know that still we are still there. That's why I'm very serious toward this government. The whatever measurement they're taking, they're thinking as a entrepreneur perspectives, and I think we have to support them. And with this, I conclude the session, and I just hand over to Dr. Sanjeev sir. And if any questions, I'm happy to answer, sir.
Right. Thank you, Lalitji, and you very succinctly, briefly, but concisely talked about the reforms that have been advocated by the government in terms of the taxation part. And you've also talked about what are the investment strategies, what should be the strategies for an individual investor in this new dispensation that has come about. So thanks a lot. So now we have some time for the question and the query round. So I think we have some questions that have been asked in the chat box. So we can take them one by one. I think one question, Dr. Muhammad Suleiman, he has raised 2-3 questions. One is about selling of airports and other infrastructure, which we said we privatization or disinvestment, and how the government is more in tune with the private sector rather than in the for the poor section, and the disparities will increase because of this. So I think Dr. Vishesh, sir, would you like to answer what Dr. Muhammad Suleiman has raised?
Sanjeev,
In fact, it's a very ticklish issue. As far as privatization of any public sector undertaking is concerned, there are views for and against, right? So when we talk about the privatization of airports and all that, in fact, if the public sector is known for inefficiency, declining profitability, and underutilization of resources, I think there is no harm for privatization. Ultimately, we mean progress. Progress could be in the public sector or in the private sector. If the public sector manages efficiently, the thing should remain in the public sector. But if the public sector is not able to manage the things effectively and efficiently, there has to be participation on the private sector also. So there should be some kind of role playing which is equal. But I think certain things, certain issues, they should always be in the public sector. As far as if you ask me personally, I would say that let this airports and all that go to the private sector, let them manage efficiently. but with a proper regulation. That is, there is no excessive burden on the air passengers. The things which should be covered in the public sector, primarily by the government, and they should assure to the teeming million, I think two things. One is education, other is health. They should be the primary responsibility of the government, right? Other things they can be taken care of. You know that as far as the airports are concerned, they are not needed by the majority of the population. They are needed by few affluent set of the society, so they can afford to, right? And if the government is raising the revenue through the privatization, and this revenue is spent on the population of the country and making other areas which are vulnerable, they are given proper attention. So there should not be any point in, right? So if this kind of privatization goes, I think this could be a welcome thing if the things move in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, in terms of the revenue to the government, in terms of spending with the government on the other sectors of the society. It should be welcome. This is my personal opinion, but
Right.
always there can be difference of opinion on this particular issue.
Right. Thank you, sir. Vinay, would you like to add upon what Professor Vashisht advocated?
Yes. Dr. Suleiman actually has raised a valid question here. So I would first like to understand, what do we do with the taxpayers' money? That is the valid question here. What is that what we do with the taxpayers' money? In case we let the giants, like Air India, to consume the money which is being paid by the taxpayer. On one side, we are saying that we've been taxed. On other side, we are letting the hard-earned money which is being given to the government as taxes, and this is being consumed by the sick PSUs, like we see in a case of Air India here, or the likes of that. So there are very few public sector enterprise which are actually profitable. So public sector enterprise, the government should actually keep them only to the extent where it is sensitive for the country. And when we see that, the sectors which has been privatized, they've been doing far more better. And, you see in the case of telecom, I think that's a very vivid example where probably to get a landline connection, we used to wait for 20 years. And now the companies are after us to get the connection. The kind of, the tariffs we used to pay. So I think they have come down drastically, and see the consumer experience. So eventually it is about a consumer experience. It is about the competitive pricing. That is where we always have the edge. Now, Dr. Suleiman says, privatization of the airports and being handed over to the two parties. I think, here probably, he may be right, but at the same time, if in case you see the privatization of the airports, I think one is with the GMR, one is with the GVK. So you cannot have that all the ports or all the things they have been actually handed over to a single party. So it's like a bidding process which has been a transparent process, which obviously has the parties who actually bid for it and who won the auction, and that is where they have got it. Yes, to some extent there could be something a favor to a particular individual or to a particular company, but by and large, I think it's been a transparent process. The rest also, I would like to take the question of Kamal. Kamal has talked about the fiscal deficit part. Why to talk about 2%, 3%? What has been the impact of fiscal deficit? So, Kamal, the fiscal deficit means the shortfall in the revenue and the expenditure. So, in case the revenue is on the lower side, we will keep borrowing. And when I say the expenditure part of it, 20% of our expenditure goes on serving the interest part of the borrowing which we have done. So the moment this will keep on increasing, so eventually, it will impact the whole economy. Nobody would be giving us the because we eventually will have to borrow it from IMF, World Bank, from other countries, and that is where how we run our show. But the more the borrowing, जैसे आपका मान लीजिए घर में आप income है आपकी, आप हर महीने अब लोन भी ले रहे हैं, कहीं से उधार भी ले रहे हैं, तो कैसे चलेगा? So eventually this fiasco will happen that one day you will be on the road. So similar situations, so fiscal deficit has to be, lower as much as possible. So this is one. Now, how to decrease this fiscal deficit? It is like, when our GDP grows, that means more money has been created. So we'll be able to serve the interest part of it, the 20% can be lowered down, and that is which goes to the other areas which are more required, like for the social sectors, for the education. That is how we can do the more, more investment in the desired sectors. So this is about the Kamal's question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay, and you've answered that very correctly. Kamal sir, just like small inflation is good for the economy, in the same way, small fiscal deficit is also good for the economy. But the question here, and as Vinay was also rightly pointing out, that you have to use this money, borrowed money, in productive assets. So if you use the money and bring about productive assets, they will be further, producing more money, and capital assets are created. But if you are using this money into subsidies, or if you are using this money to eating out or consuming things, wherein nothing is being produced, no capital assets are being produced, and your debt burden is increasing because of the, interest burden. Rather, you are pawning your, present income in the future as well. So that is actually bad. So that is why it is just like आटे में नमक. अगर आटे में नमक है तो ठीक है, अगर नमक में आटा है तो खराब है. So this answers your questions, I think. Thank you, Vinay, and thank you, Kamalji, for raising such a wonderful query. The other question is, the other question is by Dr. Saibi. He wants to ask that if, are there any schemes or allocations in the government for the rural women so as to support their livelihood? And his concern is that, the migration from the rural areas to cities is increasing. And are there any schemes available, Professor Vashist? Sir, can you answer this query from Dr. Saibi?
In fact, that as far as women in the rural areas are concerned, there are two sets of things. One is employment under the Manrega scheme. So 100 days guaranteed employment for in 1 year. In addition to this, the women can also start their own ventures, small ventures. And for this, they can get the benefits from Grameen banks, or they can go to the commercial banks operating in the rural areas. So government has a number of schemes. Even the commercial banks, they have a number of schemes for the women. I think you must be knowing about microfinance. Microfinance, there are microfinance institutions which are operating in the country. So if some women or women groups, they are interested in starting their own ventures, they should go to microfinance institutions, and they have to make little bit efforts. They have to go to them. Rather, you have to go to these institutions. They have got schemes. In fact, to my knowledge, even some of the funds which are available at the disposal of the Grameen Bank, commercial banks, and the microfinance institutions, they remain unutilized. People do not approach them. So women who are interested, they especially should go to microfinance institutions so they can get benefit.
Right. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And just to add upon what Professor Vashist was saying, sir, this microfinance, every bank now, there are lead banks, and there are, certain banks which are given the charge of that rural area for the development. The women have to come up in groups. They have to form what is termed as the self-help groups. And I think 7 to 10 women, they can come up, and they can then approach the bank for loan for, certain activities like papad making or candle making or lifafa making, and even certain areas are there, even bakery. All these are covered. But only thing is that they have to come out as a self-help group. They have to register that self-help group and approach. And I've seen personally some of the self-help groups, they are doing very well under KVIC also. It is covered. Khadi Village Industries, it is also covered. State financial or corporation also have their branches, and they provide certain loans and all this also. Frankly speaking, because I also come from the financial sector, having put in 10 years into state financial corporations, money is not the consideration. There are lot many institutions now there which are therein to help and support the people. Only thing is the intent of the persons and their training part, and so that they come up. This Lijjat Papad is a very good example of KVIC supported institution by small, and they came up in a very small manner, and today they see how big it has grown as such. So banks are not hesitant to provide the money. Rather, to women they are most welcome, because if you go by the track record also, the track record of women as a debtor is better than the track record of men as a debtor. And plus this self-help groups of 7 to 8 people, 10 people, they are very conscious in returning back the loans. So I think this can be done, and thank you for raising a very relevant query.
In
Thank
fact,
you.
I just opened up the internet. I just looked to the schemes. The number of schemes which are available currently, like Bharatiya Mahila Bank, it is providing business loans to the women only. There's Annapurna scheme, State Shakti package, Orient Mahila Vikas Yojana scheme. Then there's Dena Shakti scheme, Udyogini scheme. There's a Sant Kalyani scheme, Mahila Udyam Nidhi scheme. Even this Khadi and Village Industry Commission through the Khadi and Village Industry Boards is creating special employment opportunities for the women. So I think it's a question of pulling the money from these institutions. And a good model would be not a single women joining together, making some kind of a cooperative organization or a work group, and approaching these banks and the financial institutions for the funds. So I was telling you that there are plenty of funds which are available, but there are lesser takers. And Professor Chedda, your analysis is very right. We conducted a study, especially on the women the groups. Then it was found that the loan given to the women is 100% safe. So there are no bad debts. They are very conscious, and they deploy it very, very effectively and efficiently, especially in the areas Maharashtra, Bihar, not Bihar, but Madhya Pradesh. There's so many women groups, they are working very, very effectively and efficiently. So it's a question of women joining together and striving in the right direction. No, funds are not a constraint.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So I think this solves the query of Dr. Saibi. There's another question by Mr. Kamal, that whether the capital investment that is now allocated in the budget, will it help to empower the social sector? Vinay, would you like to take this call? The capital investment correlation with the social sector development. Yeah, Vinay, am I audible?
Yeah, please. So, I mean, the relation which I say, and I think one of the areas which probably we, either of our three panelists, we didn't touch, and in fact, not there. So, the capital investment which is going into the various schemes would definitely, give a boost to the employment. That is one for sure, right? One thing which is not being touched is the security which we are giving to the gig and the platform worker. That has been introduced for the very first time, right? So, this is like where somebody, let's say, now we have, this, Swiggy or Zomato. So, or even if in case we say about a job, so we punch in and we say we are available, right? There are job portals, we say we are available. But what about the security of these people who are the construction workers, who are the gig workers, who are the platform? There was nothing on this. There was no record of these guys. So now there has been a platform which has been created where these persons would be there who would be saying, I'm available. So in a way, this is like an organizing of the unorganized manpower, which will definitely, I think, come into the mainstream, where there will be a portal created by the government, and there will be mainstream. And government is also planning to give them a social security, social benefits, like, there is a labor code which is going to be implemented in April 2021, which talks about, this section of the society. So I think this also addresses the poor and the rich divide, which we're saying that government is not doing anything about the, the people who are poorer. So this is, in a way, would one give the boost to the employment and the opportunities created so they get the money. And also the government has revised the Manrega budget, which again gives the opportunities for these people to be working on the projects.
Right. Thank you, Vinay. And I think this answers the rural versus urban divide also, and rich versus poor divide also. So I think we've answered the queries, and we are on the last leg. So I request each of the speaker to, in a minute's time, just sum up what they talked about, and thereafter, we could conclude. Professor Vashisht, can you please sum up in just 2-3 lines your entire discourse, and followed by Vinay, and then followed by Lalitji.
I think this has been a very good discussion. In fact, we covered 3 aspects. One was the allocation to the social sector, other was the allocation to the infrastructure, and third was the income tax, the investment, and all that. Almost the important aspects of the budget have been covered. As far as the allocation to the social sector is concerned, I have a reservation to complete 100% marks as far as the effort on the part of the finance minister is concerned. I think the 2 prominent areas which have lagged, one is the education, other is the health. I was reading somewhere that we lag very behind as far as the availability of health infrastructure facilities are concerned. We don't have sufficient doctors, but to talk about paramedical staff. So if we go to remote areas, there are hours together which you have to travel to come to the mainstream, to the cities, to get this health facilities. As far as the education is concerned, I still feel I may be very different from the thinking of the government. Education should be the responsibility of the government in a country like India, where the majority of the population is not able to afford to have access to food. They cannot have access to education. I think food is first, education is second. So if you are not able to spend on your food, how can you spend on your education? So the responsibility of the government is tremendous as far as the education is concerned. Similarly, the responsibility to health. So I think in social sector also, in the years to come, we should see increased focus on these particular areas. They should be the primary responsibility. And I think as far as the infrastructure, that was very heavily covered by Mr. Vinay. He talked about all aspects of infrastructure. What are the areas which are lagging behind? What are the areas in which the focus should be there on the part of the government? And as far as the third party is concerned, I think there was not much which was dealt with regard to taxation and all that. Majority of the important provisions, they remained intact. In fact, nothing was given and nothing was taken away. So no issue. In fact, the income earners, they were lagged to. So I don't know, you cannot give to everybody. You have to take some from somebody and give to everybody, because one of the rule through the budget is to take money from some and give the money to others. I think in this particular budget, it is a middle class which has been at the receiving end, because the middle class, their income reduced, taxes remained intact, expenditure increased. This is the story of the middle class. So no major concession has been given to the middle class. I think only concession, some concession people say that senior citizen, they will not be filing their income tax return, provided their income is only from pension and the interest. I think it is not a concession. You have to file the income tax return in 1 year on one particular day. And it doesn't take more than half hour to file your income tax return. So I don't know whether it's a concession and all that. It is justly, I mean, some kind of a rhetoric only that you are pleasing somebody and you are not giving anything. So this was as far as the income tax is concerned. So you are left to the God's mercy. You have to plan, and you are some of the income which were earlier tax-free, they are made taxable. Your interest on your provident fund and all that, it used to be sacred money that you could keep it and you could enjoy the benefit and all that. So the finance minister has an eye on that particular money also. So I think I don't think that people who pay taxes, they are contributing to the national structure by paying money and all that. Some concession has been given to them. Over the year, you know that if your taxes rises, your income rises, it's okay. There should be some kind of a correlation between the inflation and the tax rates. Let the income tax slabs be linked to the inflation rate, so that if your income rises, your tax rises, your expenditure also rises, there should not be any problem. The problem arises in a situation where your income remains the same, your taxes increase, and the price level also increases. So I think this is something which is very, very ideal, which should have happened, but it has not happened. So I think this is with these words, I would conclude what has been discussed in this particular session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, Vinay, would you last concluding remark?
Yeah. So I would appreciate Dr. Vashisht, the way he has elaborated, the entire discussion here. So I would just like, to take a leaf from here and then, present a new thing. Maybe I think that would be my concluding remark. So we all been talking about that the taxation actually has not been touched by the government. But I say, let's say the Aam Aadmi, who is the Aam Aadmi? Aam Aadmi is the one who probably earns about a 10 lakh a year, right? So assuming that if in case we would have increased the standard deduction from 50,000 to 1 lakh rupees, so that means 50,000 increase as a standard deduction. So that means a saving of over 20% of a tax in case somebody is earning 10 lakh rupees. So that means 10,000 tax a year. So that means 800, 900 rupees in a month. So what is that big thing which we would have created in a way, that we have not touched the tax portion here. Another thing which I would like to present here is, why any of the governments haven't ever had, the courage to probably let go away with the income taxes, right? So probably if in case I let go away the income taxes at all, and then I cover up in a GST in case I want to cover up a Aam Aadmi, probably, every product category you take, they can be categorized into something which is being used by masses, something which is being used by a middle class, and something which is being used by a higher income group. So tax it accordingly. We already have a GST, which is not a one nation, one tax. We have already have 3 slabs. So put it into 3 slabs, and then, you earn your revenue through the indirect taxes rather than, getting it through the taxes, which is direct income tax. I think that absolves the common people every time looking at the budget, looking at 5,000, 10,000 rupees. So this is my take here. I think rest of it has already been, very well explained by Dr. Vashisht. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Right. Thank you, Vinay. Yeah, Lalit, would you like to add upon just the last concluding remark in terms of, taxation reforms?
Yes, sir, already in detail way, sir concluded. But I just say, Anil one, the union budget 2000 was as a no harm one. So that as our finance minister kept direct taxes unchanged, not to overburden people, but the much needed focus on the health and infrastructure. I hope we will take away from this way. And thanks for this very informative discussion, sir. Thanks for inviting.
Right. So thank you, Lalit, and so friends, we come to the end of this session, and just to there were a number of outcomes and deliverables on this. So I think it was a difficult phase in terms of health also. So the finance minister had a difficult task to do, but keeping in view all the circumstances and the challenging positions, she's been able to come up with a budget which, as Lalit rightly said, which is a no harm, and with a lot of focus on the health issues, which are very, very, very important. Health allocation has gone up, and then the futuristic focus is on the infrastructure, and to bring about the second generation reforms which were long overdue in terms of the labor reforms, in the reform of the electricity or the power generation, to bring about the green technologies, and to bring about Atmanirbhar Bharat. And I think the stresses on not on the doles and subsidies and providing freebies, the stresses on providing a congenial environment which is not only competitive but which is transparent, and wherein the everybody grows up in that environment, and without any kind of a bias or without any kind of pressures or pushes as such. So this has been the focus of the budget, and I think the best part is that the morale has not been gone down, because the 8-9 months the morale of the entire world has gone down, including India. But somehow the India has moved up, and the stock market has shown a thumbs up to the budget also, and to the reforms that the ministry has proposed. Now we touched more than 50,000. One point of time, 2007-8, we did a session on the stock market at 20,000. So 2007-8 to 2020-21, in roughly 12-13 years, we have touched from 17,000-18,000 to now 50,000, so 3 times. So stock market indicator has also given a thumbs up to the government, and somehow the government, and generally, you know, some of the economists and thinkers, they are through on that, on a V-shaped recovery which will happen. So they say that next year our the GDP and the growth rate will be as high as maybe 9 to 10%. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and let us give it to our finance minister and to the people of this country, who are not only perseverant, and who are not only with lot of patience, with lot of spirit, those people who have survived. So with these words, friends, we conclude the session. Thank you so much. Just an announcement that e-certificate and recording on YouTube will be available. You have to kindly ping on 8727857116. I repeat, 8727857116, and we'll send you the e-certificate. And in a day or two, we'll also forward the recording to you. So friends, till next time, I just thank the 3 panelists, Professor Vashesht, Mr. Vinay Grover, and Mr. Lalit Malhotra, for sparing their valuable time on this Sunday afternoon. And the IHRDI team, comprising of Sanya, Dr. S.K. Sharma, Mohammad Salman ji, Saibi Saab, Professor Jeet Kumar Gupta ji, who all the time throughout the week work from behind the scene to come up with such topics and such good discussions. And I also thank my lovely audience who comes up and spare their time on Sunday afternoons. So friends, till the time we meet once again, so goodbye, sayonara, and Jai Hind.